Hello and welcome back to the Guns on Pegs podcast. My name is George Brown. I'm the editor at Guns on Pegs and the head of inspiration at Scribehound. I am joined once again at the microphone by Chris Horn. Chris, how you doing?
I'm very good, George.
Very
genuinely, good. I genuinely think I'm the best I've been in a long while when it comes to shooting.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, I know why. Come on. This was your walked up species day, right?
Yeah, you heard. I think you're aware that it wasn't a walked up species day, aren't
you?
Well,
the photographs of you standing in a grouse butt rather gave that away, I think.
So I was up in Durham, actually right next door to where our guest today has spent a lot of his life on Monday. But I got a text on Saturday as I was getting my stuff ready to leave on Sunday morning. And he said, yeah, we've got quite a few about. It's double guns on Monday. And I basically started dancing around the kitchen. It was going to be a walk around day for the end of the season and turned into something else. I've never shot November grouse. And my God, it was unbelievable. There was quite a wind. Conditions were perfect. And I drew quite well on the odd draw as well, which made it even more enjoyable.
Amazing.
But honestly, George, we talk about pheasant shooting a lot. We talk about all forms of shooting, but I genuinely came away from that having absolutely confirmed in my head that a November grouse is worth at least 4 times a pheasant. And I'm done on that for good.
Well, I wish I was able to confirm or deny your analysis, but having never shot at grouse of any description, I'll have to take your word for it. But I don't dispute it for a second.
And the other important thing, I got a bit of abuse on a group chat that I sent a photo on for double guns, because on a recent podcast we were talking about double gunning, and I said on pheasants I'm not really sure it's necessary, but we specifically said wild birds it does not count. It absolutely is, and Monday it absolutely was, and I loved every second of it. So yes, I just want to put that one straight.
Well, so yeah, I don't know if I've told you this. I haven't had anything quite like such a glamorous experience as you have, but I'm very excited. I think I have said before that a couple of years ago the council put this new cycle path in through the farm, and as part of that project they dug a pond, and we've been sort of joking about whether some ducks would turn up. And I was chatting to my brother the other day, and he said that he'd counted 18 ducks on there the other day. So this weekend, he and I are going to go. His baby is due this weekend. So I said, what better time than to go and see if we can shoot a couple of ducks. So that's my plan for this weekend. And it's not grouse shooting, but I'm very excited about it.
Absolutely, because that's basically council-funded duck shooting, and it doesn't get much better than that.
I know, it's amazing. We're going to see if we can persuade them to dig a couple more ponds.
Right.
Well, anyway, you've mentioned our guests. I think you'd better introduce them, Chris.
Absolutely. So our guest today, up until 2020, spent 15 years as headkeeper at East Allenheads Estate up in Durham, employing 15 keepers, managing 3 different moors over 30,000 acres. My God, that's a lot. He's worked on numerous heather restoration projects. He's been involved in the revolutionary medicated grit that's come in. When he retired, a GWCT survey of the estate counted 429 curlew pairs. So what that tells you is he's very accurate with the rifle. Ian Coghill, one of the most knowledgeable men on the uplands, called him the grouse whisperer. And I think that is honestly the best bit of endorsement you can get.
I think that might be the episode title.
He is regarded as one of the best gamekeepers ever. No word of a lie. Put down your hedge trimmers and wave your beating flags in the air for none other than Steve Colmer.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for having me on.
Steve, it's a great pleasure.
I'm not sure about the grouse whisperer, but
no, that's the bit out of all of that I'm absolutely sticking by.
Thank you.
I feel like you should have it on a T-shirt.
I've got quite a few things on a T-shirt, but it's not grouse whisperer.
We were up together earlier on in the year, and I remember talking to Ian at that point, and he'd been round in the car with you on the moor, and he genuinely was like, "What? That guy's got talents that I don't think I've seen anyone else have."
Yeah, no, we set off one morning with Ian to look at some everything really, all the waders and everything else that was on the fell that morning. But I'm a little bit sort of one way. So they're all looking for different species and I'm looking for grouse. And I have this way of making grouse to show themselves and get them to come to you close. And of course, I can never get bored of that. But I think poor old Ian got to the stage where he was like, "Yeah, Steve, I've got the joke. We know what a grouse is."
Well, speaking of talent, so have you seen Chris shoot grouse, Steve?
No.
Oh, that's disappointing. I was hoping you were going to tell us that he's rubbish.
Well, no. I haven't seen Chris shoot grouse. No, but I've listened to you lads, and it sounds like it should be Chris Dickweed the way you carry on.
I wish. You wouldn't have been. I don't think you would have been inviting me back to sort of be on your mop-up days based on my performance on Monday. I was borrowing a pair of guns, and it went well. It was just enjoyment, honestly.
I've been invited to shoot in the end of the month at the championship at Brickloo, the Labrador Championship. So Rab, the headkeeper, says, "Oh, are you going to come, Steve?" Yeah. And I asked, he said, "You sure you're coming?" I am. I said, "Well, I've got a couple of problems. One is I haven't got any cartridges and I haven't got a gun." So I'm going to go up there. I can't think the last time I shot properly was quite a long time ago. So, but anyhow, I'm going to go and I'm going to stand beside Rab and pretend it was me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that would be good fun.
Yeah.
And I bet, and that's, I can imagine being in the job the whole time. If you get invited to shoot on someone else's moor, that's a very
not doing
feeling.
it. Not doing it.
Really?
There's no way. I'm not a chance. There's I got tricked out maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Jerry at Gunnerside said, "Oh, Steve, I need some out on whatever day. Can you come?" And yeah, I'll be there. And of course, as I get there, he hands me his 20 bore and says, "Right, you're shooting for the day." And it felt like I was shooting my favourite dog every drive. I just couldn't cope with shooting at grouse.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, there's no way. Not a prayer.
A bit of a busman's holiday.
No, just they're my bread and butter, aren't they? They were my life. So to shoot one wasn't for me, no.
That is really interesting because I don't think it's anything like the same I can imagine. I'm guessing here, if you're a lowland keeper with pheasant and partridge, because they're reared, I just don't think you'd see them in the same way. The effort that you put over making sure the grouse numbers were there.
I don't know. I don't shoot. Right, yeah, I'm going to go to Drumlanrig to shoot, on the championship. But that's because my friends are going, and I've been asked to go, and it's going to be just a real good time to catch up with everybody. And I've got to make somebody's day by missing it and somebody getting it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do what you do, Chris, but better. but once upon a time, I'd travel through the night to go shooting, but I wouldn't set off now to go anywhere shooting. No, but if you said to me, there's something going where I could go and learn something and watch and learn, and that could be anything. If it's a gilly on a river or somebody that's got some new pheasant drives or somewhere I've never been before, that would be my hunger for sure.
It was 6 hours up to Durham on Sunday night, and it was the quickest 6-hour drive I've ever had. I could have flown there.
Yeah.
It was just really enjoyable. Very good. Right, time for a drink.
Indeed. So we like to start things off the right way, Steve. So I'm going to ask you, what's that you're drinking?
I have got a Abbeydale Brewery American IPA.
Very nice.
So it's nice, but if I had a fault, it's a 4.1. And to talk to you lads and build up a bit of courage, it would have been better at 4.6.
Yeah. So they're in Sheffield, and you live in Sheffield, don't you? Or just outside?
Yeah, I do live in Sheffield. So yeah, one of the things I miss about Northumberland is the beer. I would probably set off now to go to a pub that had Allendale Brewery Pennine Pale. I would probably go now if my mate said it's ready, Steve. I would go.
That was the staple.
That was the go-to beer. Yeah. And then, like down in the south of England where we are, I go to every pub, and where the problem is, I have had to start drinking lager, which isn't, it's better than nothing. But yeah, you look over the bar and they'll have something like a Timothy Taylor's on, but they haven't got the widget on it, and they just splosh it into the bottom of the pint, and you know that by morning your bowels are going to be looser than what it came out of. So it's just not, they need to go to Northumberland and learn how to do beer.
That's high praise.
Yes.
I've never heard Sheffield described as south before. That's enjoyable.
Well, it is south to where I was, sorry.
Exactly. George, what are you on?
Well, so I've been hoping to save this for the episode when we talk about the podcast shoot day, because on that day, one of our guests very kindly brought me a bottle of whiskey. But it was so nice, and I've been holding on for it for so long. So this is the last dram out of a bottle of Edredor 10-year-old single malt Scotch, and it's absolutely delicious, which is why I've had to have it today rather than waiting another couple of weeks before we record about that day. Otherwise, it would have all gone.
So one of our very kind guests also gave me a little hip flask of whiskey. Is it the same guest, and therefore is that the whiskey that I have in my hip flask?
No, it was a different guest. And I've got a hip flask as well from that day, so that's what I'm saving that for now. But I haven't actually tried that one in the hip flask.
Because that one doesn't have writing on the front, so I would have to try and work out what it is, and that involves ringing you and just trying to describe the flavours.
No, I don't know what that is, so I'm looking forward to that. But no, this one's, I've never even heard of Edredor before, but it is really nice. Really, really nice. And so a huge thank you to that listener.
Have you always been able to drink whiskey? Is it something you've as you've got a little bit older you've come into?
Yeah, I first picked it up on a fishing trip with a bunch of my dad's mates. We'd finished supper, quite a boozy supper on the first night of the trip, and one of them said, "Are you joining us for Whiskey Club, George?" And I said, "Oh, I'm not really. Don't really drink spirits. Not really that bothered." And they said, "No, come on. Have you had it with a drop of water? All this stuff." And I had, I mean, as a first whiskey, I had 10-year-old Lefroy, which is quite a baptism of fire, really. But I immediately fell in love, and drink little else these days. Actually, tea and whiskey are the main ones. So that, yes, it's a very, very nice dram, and I'm enjoying it a lot. I'm trying to eke it out for the whole episode. Chris, what have you got?
So I actually have a repeat drink, which I don't do ever, really, but this one deserves it. Tim Madams, one of our previous guests, created a drink called elderberry porth, which is essentially a port, but made out of elderberries. It was selling really, really well. It must have been 2 years ago, this time of year. It was in the run up to Christmas, and he got a call from the marketing board, or the sort of association for port, from one of their lawyers, and was like, "You can't call it that." And he was like, "What do you mean? It's in the run up to Christmas. It's doing really well." And the only reason he'd done that is because he tried to trademark the name. Anyway, during this Zoom call with this lawyer, he was like, "Well, look, what do you want me to call it?" And she was like, "I don't care what you call it, as long as you call it something else." And so he called it elderberry something else.
That's very Tim.
It's so Tim.
He's a bad man. He once did me over in the pub one night. He went, if you ever get him on his own, just say, "Tim, can you tell me about the time you did one on Steve?"
So he was on this day on Monday, right? And he said to me, "Ask Steve about the time."
do you want to hear the story?
Yeah, yes, go.
Right. So Tim had been up cooking, and there's the local pub. Just when we walked and met, and obviously after a busy day, we were getting on the beers, and all the lads were having a great time. And we were sort of last man standing, and this, I don't know how it all came about, but it was, who can do the best mangina impression? Tim says, "Go on, Steve, me and you, mangina impression, and we'll see who's got the best, who can do the best." So I'm looking at him going, "Oh, you've been serious?" He said, "Come on, mate. The lads are here, a bit of fun. Let's, you know." So of course I've unbuckled me top of my breeks and took the old lad away, and he's doing his. He says 3, 2, 1, Steve. I went, righto, 3, 2, 1. And of course I drop my drawers, look up, and he hasn't done it. It's just me stood in the middle of the pub with my breeks down around my ankles. One side of me's doing a fruit bowl, and the other one's doing a mangina.
Oh my goodness!
So that was my last encounters of Tim.
That's very him. Yeah, I don't think many of my Tim stories are even possible to share on this podcast going out as explicit. I'll save them for another time when we're in the pub.
Yeah.
So how long have you had your bottle of something else, Chris?
Well, I drank half of it first time round. I'm about to do the next half.
Good. And so you're going to be useful at the GWCT quiz as well then?
Yeah, the thing is, all GWCT events are always, like, for us, they're always in London. Like, they're the sort of ones that we go to in town. They're doing one in our local hockey club, which is about half a mile over through the wood, which is just weird. Like, I'm not expecting them to come down this neck of the wood, so I'm just going to walk through the wood to the hockey club, and I'm all good. So yeah, prepping for the quiz.
Excellent. So it'll be a rare one, but I'm going to be not the most pissed at the end of the recording, so that's good. Right. Yeah. Steve, what we do next is we like to turn to our post bag. We ask our listeners to send in their shooting quandaries and queries and questions for a section that we call Whose Bird Is It Anyway? And this episode submission comes from somebody who sent in their query to pod@gunsonpegs.com with one of those sort of foxy, potentially syndicate closing dilemmas. I've decided to call them Friedrich. And Friedrich says, Dear George and Chris, I'm a regular gun on a small syndicate shoot in Cambridgeshire. I feel this syndicate represents the very best of what shooting has to offer. It's affordable, friendly, and sustainable. It's a melting pot of characters from all socio-economic backgrounds, from CEOs to farmers to gardeners, and all ages and genders. The guns and beaters lunch together as one. In my view, it's a very sustainable shoot. There's a strict limit on the bag size, 30 birds per day for 8 days, with 250 birds released. All shot birds enter the food chain, and everybody mucks in to keep it as a team. Those who can't pay more for their peg. When it comes to peg allocation, it's usually very democratic, with guns taking it in turns to captain the day and assign peg placements on each drive. Various factors are taken into account, such as the physical mobility of each individual and how many birds people have had a chance at that day. There is, however, one exception to this rule. On one of our drives, there's a long central field which the guns surround in the shape of a U. The beaters drive the birds through the field, and they sometimes rise out of the crop to the left and right, but generally tend to stay down until the last minute. At the bottom edge of the field, a hedge runs off to the side. The birds tend to flush vertically, see the hedge, turn, and follow it. Indisputably, the best peg is 50 yards down this hedge line, as your silhouette is obscured and the birds are blistering. I would argue it's the best peg on the whole shoot, not that I've ever shot it. That's because a chap called Harry always stands on that peg. I've been part of the syndicate for over 5 years and have never seen anyone else get a chance to shoot it. The most peculiar thing is, I've never heard it being mentioned, even for peg placement. It just seems to happen. I don't want to disrupt an otherwise excellent syndicate with whinging, but I'd also love for others to enjoy what appears to be a golden peg. How can I gently open up this otherwise unspoken topic for debate? Should I shut up and enjoy what I have, or make a stand for what is honourable, true, and fair?
Well, Friedrich, you have done exactly the right thing and air it anonymously in quite a public way. What a bizarre scenario. So one guy, they're in a normal syndicate, and one guy always has the best peg of the shoot every time.
Yeah, that's the long and short of it.
Right. Steve, what are you going to do in this scenario if you're one of the other guns?
I'd probably have a word with him and just say, would you like to share that peg? Or I'd say, would you like to share that peg? Maybe, Harry, you could go as a back gun and Chris could go in front of you. So he still has the same advantage.
What I'd love to know is whether this happens just because Harry's a bit kind of, he's hanging at the back all the time and just happens to always be the last one placed on their peg, or if he's kind of being clever about sort of maneuvering himself into the eye line of the shoot captain on the day, so that as they get to peg 4, it's like, oh, Harry, you can go there. Or if there's I feel like maybe there's some history from back in the day that it was just always, it was decided, like there was a bet or something that he won, and therefore he's always on that peg.
Behind this story is one of the best stories in shooting. That's what I'm going to guess. there is a reason.
I think what they should do is, if they do 6 days or 8 days here, whatever they said they did, take it in turns who should be shoot captain on each day.
Yeah.
So shoot captain could be Harry one day. So he obviously, if he wants to maneuver his way towards the best position, he can. But the following week it would be another person's. That would resolve it.
I like that. It becomes the captain's peg.
Yes.
Yeah.
The reward for taking on the duties on that morning.
That's very professional, very diplomatic. I like it. It's a very good suggestion.
I think knowing my luck, though, I'd probably end up at the other end, even though I was trying to get there.
But it's interesting, a placing of pegs rather than doing a draw at the beginning of the day. We shot on that day in Herefordshire, didn't we, Chris, where we were placed? And I think it worked. But I think you've got to be pretty hot on, where the shooting's been and that kind of thing to make it work. And of course, none of us were that bothered one way or the other. But
you can't place if you're shooting. You have to be watching the line, don't you? Because otherwise you get it wrong. The person who's had a drink just feels that maybe Friedrich slept with Harry's wife, and this is the only way, or Harry slept. This is the only way. He's like, look, mate, I'm really sorry, but you can have that peg every time. I don't know. It's very odd, isn't it? Do you reckon he just pays more secretly? There's no way, if that is the best peg of the shoot every time, that you're getting away with it for that long. Like, surely it's just that Friedrich doesn't realise that other members of the syndicate know the true story, and he's just not privy to that just yet.
You'd just think after 5 years it had come out, though.
Yeah.
But you know what? Even doing a gun, shooting at home here, there was a whole season where we have a drive where 3 guns are on the right-hand side of a hedge and the rest of the line are on the left-hand side. And for 5 days here, it just so happened that I was on the right-hand side of the hedge every single day. I never once stood on the left-hand side of the hedge. And the weird thing is that I hadn't even drawn the same numbers each time. It's just that we did the drives in a different order. And so I ended up on that side of the hedge. And those things can happen even when you're drawing pegs and you're shooting at the same place regularly.
But if this happens to this guy 5 years in a row every day, he should be buying a lot of lottery tickets. Because that's just bizarre. I think the advice Steve has given is the best advice that we are going to possibly find. I do think that also this needs to be aired in public as the reason for presenting that solution to the problem. Because then maybe the true story might come out amongst the syndicate members on a day, and that would make that day even better.
And presumably there is an annual AGM, and he could just suggest that they draw pegs from now on.
Yeah.
Or maybe part of the charm is that everybody takes it in turns to do the placing.
Whatever happens, my advice is please do something and then message us with what happened when this guy realised he wasn't on that peg, please. Or if the true story came out. Something's got to be done. So he's obviously been fretting for a while, and he's decided to message in anonymously. He said small syndicate shoot in Cambridgeshire, said exactly how many birds they put down. I mean, we're narrowing it down quite heavily.
And the bloke's called Harry, yeah.
Oh, is he you didn't even change his name?
No, I didn't.
There's a lot of people now that know exactly who this bloke is. Cool.
Steve, did you ever have, in your professional career, did you have people who were fed up about where they ended up in the line ever, or think you were driving the birds over the other end deliberately or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of shooting. So you always had people say, I had this ability to pick certain people in an area and put the grouse stay away. And I think if you've got a certain person that's took the day and he's bringing all the guests and he's been out of it all day, and you have an ability to go to a certain drive and you know that his peg number 6 is the best butt, then why not take him there and if he's been out of it, take him there and go, he's kind enough to bring everybody. He didn't draw particularly well. Yeah, so you can't, I would always try and look after everybody. But to be honest with Grouse, if they decide they're going to go to a certain way, they're going to go. But they do favour not just one butt as such, not on the ground that I worked on. There'd be 3 or 4 butts, and probably 2 out of them 4 would be better than, you could build round 2 butts if you like. So some might be 4, 3 and 5 would be good, but 4 was the pound seat. But that's because the contours and different things. But I get exactly the reason with old Harry, whatever his name was. He stood by the hedge. That's where I'd go.
Yeah, on a low ground partridge shoot, especially flat ground in Cambridgeshire, just get on the hedge every time. That's always the winner. Doesn't matter what peg number it is, just get on the hedge. The thing that amazes me about grouse every time is you see beaters like, I don't know, 2 miles away, a mile away, on the top of, like, literally on the top, a little speck. And then a pack of grouse will still just come straight through the line.
Yeah.
And they're that far away. I mean, you imagine flushing pheasants from a mile out and hoping they go over the guns. It's just not happening, is it?
No.
And I just find it amazing. Obviously, they're following the contours. You know what's going to happen. But you can't move the butts or anything. They're there for good.
I used to, when I set off in this world as a grouse keeper, there was a drive in the Peak District, and it was a big drive. And we used to all line up on the Pennine Way, and I used to have a whistle. We used to start the drive with a whistle. And I used to love blowing the whistle and waiting for a few minutes, and there you'd hear bang, bang, bang.
Really?
Yeah.
So just the sound of the whistle was enough to get the birds.
Yeah, you're getting into the end of September, into October, the grouse sort of move on. They knew that we were setting off. You blow the whistle and you just wait. It scents a long time, but it's probably a few minutes, and you could just hear in the faint distance. And the drive would probably take 50 minutes to come in, so you can imagine how far out you were.
It's undescribable. The last drive on Monday, the birds were doing that the moment they left off. So early November, I can imagine, incredibly jumpy.
Oh, yeah.
And they were doing that, but they didn't come through in packs on this particular drive. I mean, still packs, but like small packs. And it just kept on coming. It's a good 45 minutes of continuous seeing grouse through the line. Unlike anything else.
I feel like you're trying to rub it in now. Let's move on.
I honestly on cloud 9 after it. It was just so good. Good. We give them some good feedback for this chap then.
Yeah, I think so.
This is definitely another one where we need them to message in again.
Yes.
Cool. Right. We've got another one, and we thought Steve would be really well placed to help with this one. Comes from someone that I have actually named for the first time. No real reason for this one. Randy Michaels III. Any guesses where he's from? I recently found your podcast and I'm hooked. I'm an American with a passion for British shooting. We have a few options for British-style shooting here in America, but my choice features a British shoot captain and a British chef. I'm convinced it's close, by American standards, to an authentic British experience. However, my issue is that with the pre-shoot briefing, I've found that after breakfast, the guns want to take to the pegs and begin shooting. Of course, the captain must give a safety talk, but he then waders into a discussion of the various shooting methods and so on. Sometimes he gives a demonstration of each method. He always gives his recommended method and the benefits of it. In my opinion, it's not practical for the guns to change their shooting method just minutes before the shoot and without any practice. Before the pegs can be drawn, the guns start to get up to use the restroom or to change their boots. The captain then needs to herd everyone back together to draw pegs. It can be chaotic. My question is, how long should the pre-shoot briefing take and what should be covered? Methods. I'm slightly lost on methods. Is he standing there telling people how to shoot?
Yeah, he's going, you could use the swing through method. You could use the, whatever the one is where you're always in front. I can't remember the name of it now. All these different techniques.
I mean, that's really brave. The morning of a shoot being like, right, guys, here's how you do it.
I think it's a bit too late for that, isn't it?
Exactly.
You're going live.
Yeah. Pre-shoot briefings. You've definitely given a few of these, haven't you, Steve?
Definitely done those.
How many do you reckon?
Oh, crikey. Thousands.
So is it like pushing play in your head?
Yeah. But I think when I always used to put a time on it, and it was 9:15 safety briefing. suited and booted before then. As soon as I'd finished the safety briefing, it was wagons roll, and I'd go to my vehicle and I'd set off. And people that, we used to always be not always, but repeat custom, they'd always go after safety briefing, we're out of here. So that was one of the main things. I think with safety briefing is that, especially with grouse, is make it short and sweet, but to the point. And quite often when you're grouse shooting, you'll be double guns. So your loaders are always, they do this day in, day out, which I think is paramount, really. It's important that you have, especially if you haven't done a lot of grouse shooting, to have somebody that has that experience with the safety pegs, the flankers moving or not hearing the horn, which happens, and things, So, yeah, it was the same drill, 9:15, done by 9 o'clock, and with wagons roll. And then quite often, somebody that you knew that hadn't been before, a little bit unsure, you'd put your best loader with them. And, you don't want to sort of belittle them by saying, oh, he's not been before or she's not been before. Just have a little chat with them on one-to-one. I never had any problems. It was, but you can go to some and you need a cup of tea and a bacon sandwich before they're finished.
Yeah. And that's a real problem, because if they do actually have one or two important points, they're lost.
Yeah.
I mean, we've said on this podcast before that certainly on lowland shoots, it can sometimes feel a bit like the safety briefing when you get on the plane. You're like, yeah, I know where the exits are. Come on, let's get going. I always make a point of making sure that I'm listening, because you never quite know what the local rules, for want of a better term, might be.
The guys that appear every week on, like, if it's a syndicate shoot, they should just change up. Like, today we're numbering from the right, not the left, and we're going up 3 and whatever, and you can find out who's listening quite quickly.
Yes.
Well, that goes back to changing your head of each shoot day. Because obviously each shoot manager of the day would say something different, so that would make things better.
It's a funny one. Like, low ground shoots, the briefing, I don't know, what are you looking for? Etiquette is probably the biggest thing. The safety is the same thing everywhere, isn't it? Like, clear sky behind the birds. No,
shoot what gives you pleasure.
Usually, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Shoot. Yeah, exactly. But be safe. But then there's a few other little bits in that briefing that you want to be listening out for. Like things like no pigeons before the first bird. Some shoots are like, crack on with the pigeons, don't care. Others are like, absolutely no way, wait for all the partridges type thing.
Well, I think the big one's woodcock, which has probably got the biggest variation. Ground game. Some you'll go some places and they say, if you see a fox and you don't shoot it, I'm going to have serious words with you at the end of the day. Others will say, if you see a fox, on absolutely no account are you to shoot it. So, you do have to be listening.
I think it's an interesting one. That I agree with you. Foxes used to feature regularly, like many years ago. I feel like in recent years, I've not heard anyone say that ground game's acceptable on a shoot day, just for the fear of someone getting it wrong. But it might just be where I've been visiting or whatever. But it feels like people are more safety conscious of the chances of that going wrong than they might have been in the past.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's definitely rarer to be told that ground game is on the menu.
Yeah.
So the short answer is it shouldn't be. I don't think the safety briefing should be more than about 5 minutes, should it? There's a few other bits in there as well. Welcome and lovely to have you all here, and what a wonderful / terrible day for it. All that sort of stuff. But 5 minutes is plenty.
Yeah. So this particular guy's shoot with the captain going into the various safety shooting methods, he's definitely gone off topic there. Someone needs to put him up. Just send him this pod, maybe that would sort that one.
Perhaps we should record a safety briefing. We'll get Steve to record us a safety briefing to send.
Just
then you can just push play on your phone and walk away.
Well, there's a couple of places now you just go in the gun room and watch the TV.
Oh no! Like when you go like a skydive or something, and you've got a video from 1986 of like how it should be done.
Yeah. But sometimes we, if it was a let day, we'd have somebody that was hosting for the days, and I used to always say, "All right, you do it today," and they'd catch them out a little bit and put them on the spot. So that was always a bit of fun as well. And then they'd, because on grouse, your safety pegs, 1 and 2 flankers, and shot cartridges, first horn, second horn, all these things. There's quite a lot to take on. So it's always good that somebody turns up that brings a shooting party and then put them on the spot, how to dismount and remount, shooting behind and these things. So the grouse one is quite in depth.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Maybe each safety briefing should start with, right, guys, really need you to listen today because we're doing something hugely different to what we normally do. And then do your briefing, and then someone will go, what's different? You go, oh, nothing, I just want you to listen.
Yes, psychology. Good. Well, that was very good.
Hopefully Randy Michaels doesn't get taught how to shoot anymore. That's my hope there.
Yes. Okay, so to finish off the correspondence bit, we've got, well, it's not really a query. I don't really know what it is. A suggestion, possibly. It comes from someone I've decided to call Paris. And Paris says, I've had a brilliant idea to save shooting forevermore. It's a radical idea, but please hear me out. For context, I grew up in a small village in the middle of nowhere, whereas my partner grew up on the urban fringes of London. Therefore, it's not surprising that because of our differing backgrounds, she had never been on a game shoot before meeting me, as I don't think Heathrow Airport would appreciate the release of pheasants on the edge of the runway. Since being together, we've attended a few shoots and eaten lots of game, which she wouldn't have experienced otherwise. I'm sure this has meant I've spread the word of what we do to someone who doesn't have an opinion on the subject, and as such have widened our support for shooting. Further to this, any of her family and friends I can persuade to the idea of shooting and everything it brings to the environment and rural communities will help the cause. So my proposition is as follows. We should widen our gene pool. Rather than dating fellow country folk who understand the benefits of shooting, hunting, and fishing, we should be radical and invade the towns and cities looking for a mate. Sow your seed far and wide. If you come across a fellow countryside person, do not entertain them as a potential life partner. Swipe left and get rid of them. They're already on the right side of shooting. The only issue I can see is exactly how we navigate our red diesel TD5s into the middle of the ULEZ cities and towns.
He's definitely had a drink before this one, hasn't he?
Well, I do what Paris has said. I do think is quite true. I'm not sure her solution's is quite right, but there is a divide between where we are and inner cities, for sure.
Yeah. It's and they're right about the sort of undecided middle as well, just that most people don't really care one way or the other until you ask them. And if you can get them on board before they've had an opinion formed for them by the people who shall remain unnamed, then that's a good thing. This is quite a radical approach to it.
That is a good idea, but marrying them is quite serious.
Well, I think I probably did.
Well, I did too. So
well, you were forward thinking.
Yeah, exactly. No, who knows that Paris isn't maybe me or George? But...
Was that part of your calculation, Chris? When you decided to pop the question?
I'm so committed to the future of shooting that I must bring one other person into the circle. Funnily enough, George didn't come into it. Actually, it's probably the opposite. I talk about shooting far too much. And when I met Flo, not talking about shooting was actually really quite nice. I wonder whether that ever came into it. Just, on first early dates and stuff. You imagine if I don't know, for me, on an early date back then, if all that person wants to do was talk about shooting, I probably would have been like, wow, this is too much. I'm going to be like 24/7 the whole time. I don't know. Could have worked the other way.
I think it's how it's presented, isn't it? The first encounter of a day shooting, if it was on Harry's syndicate, little small syndicate of 30 birds, a meeting at the pub and having a bacon sandwich and that sort of day, I think who's not to like that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then come into a Steve Colmer let day and I've got to do this and I've got to hit that and I've got to go the other. She hasn't got time to look, blink or, it's game on. So there is a big difference, I think. I think it's her first experience of it. Yeah. It's whether it's make or break.
I wish I'd been more organised, actually, because I just remembered that we do ask in the census, how people found their route into shooting, who it was who introduced them, and I'm convinced that a significant proportion is through, obviously the majority is like my dad or my granddad or whatever, but like there's definitely a lot of people who are introduced to shooting because their other half is into it, and they kind of get dragged along.
you proposing an additional question to the census next year, which is, did your other half shoot before you met them? It's quite in depth, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's got to be 2 questions with logic, Chris, if we want to get into the weeds of it. So,
Okay, fine, we'll move on.
But good. I like the suggestion. Thank you very much for it. It's good. And anybody who decides to take up the advice, definitely send us an email, pod@gunsonpegs.com. I want to know about that.
The expanding the gene pool section of the pod. Good.
Yeah, interesting turn of phrase there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so Friedrich, Randy Michaels III, Paris, and of course now you, Steve, are the newest members of the most noble order of the Garters and will very soon be in receipt of a set of the much coveted, highly exclusive Guns on Pegs podcast shooting stock Garters. If you too have got a shooting confession, quandary, or a query that you'd like us and our guests to help you with, or if you've got an unpopular opinion to share, or you'd like to tell us about a forgotten drive, or if you've got other suggestions about how people should take their love lives forward, and you'd like a set of Garters, drop us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com.
So you just alluded to it, Steve, the team around you on a shoot day, because you're in quite a serious operation. So is this like... is this a fun atmosphere, the beating team? Was it all really good bunch, and did they all always come back, or is it?
I think that's probably some of my fondest moments. Really, was the beaters. When I think about it, we used to have 3 minibuses, 17 seaters, and they used to set off in their sort of merry way, collecting different people from different parts of Hexhamshire and County Durham, and.
Did you have like were you going to collect the same people each time, or did you have like did it word get round that, oh, if you want a day's beating, you hang around here at this point?
Yes. Yeah. So the first 17 on the bus could come, the rest had to get left behind. and then sometimes there'd be a particular person that wasn't behaving themselves, and the bus driver would be told, don't allow Joe Bloggs on tomorrow morning. If he's there, tell him he's not allowed on.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. But it was great. I mean, these guys were nice when they set off. I mean, these weren't kids. Some of these were, adults, and they just loved the whole, And I used to say to them, right, and give them some authority and a bit of responsibility. So you 4, you're going to go line up there and bring in that piece. You've got this, lads. And you can see their chests getting bigger as they sort of set off on their way into the deepest depths of a grouse moor. But I think one of the best ones was, I had a close friend. He used to come flanking every day, and he was travelling up from Penzance, and he cut across onto the A1. I'm not sure whereabouts on the A1. Pulled up for fuel, and he. As he's coming out the service station, there's this chap on the side of the road with his thumb out. And of course, Roy, being Roy, single bloke, thought, well, see where he wants to go. So he pulls up and he says to this chap, where do you want to go? He says, well, north. So he jumps in his car and off they go up the A1. So as they're travelling up the A1 and getting closer towards Durham, Roy's going, what do you fancy doing and what you going? His bloke says, well, I'm from Glasgow. He said, I'm just trying to, Prestwick, sorry, I'm trying to get my way back up there. And, well, if you like, I'll ring me mate, Steve. You can come to work with me tomorrow, flanking. And I said, so he obviously then rings me, Roy, Steve, tomorrow. Yeah. Do you need any flankers? I was like, well, yeah, you come in, Roy, yeah. My mate, he wants to come. So I says, righto. So anyhow, Roy turns up, and Roy was a sort of one of them people that you'd look at twice anyhow when you saw him. All right. But when this chap gets out of this vehicle, he's been, this is the truth. He'd been homeless and was still homeless. And Roy turned up with this guy, and I was like, who, what, where? And he's walking up towards the gun room, and he says, I'll meet my mate Jonathan, I think his name was, or something like that. And I was like, look, and I'm like, what am I going to do with this man? I've got to hide him. What am I going to do with him? I mean, he needed a sorting out. He wanted feeding, And I said to Roy, and of course all the lads turn up, who's that, Steve? Who's that? I said, Roy has picked him up I asked Roy. Roy said I was coming up there. Tells me the story. So the lads say, right. So they called him A1 Jockey, right? So A1 Jockey, he was never been on a grouse moor, had no ideas about anything at all to do with shooting. And he was thrown in the deep end as Steve's next flanker. So I'm setting off down the flank and I can see everybody staring at me going, who's he? What's he? But anyhow, A1 Jockey could not walk. He was the poor lad. He got trainers on. And all these, it was a proper throw me in the deep end Roy. So through the day, we had to give him less jobs because the old boy couldn't, he just wasn't ready for this. But when I dropped him off first flank, he didn't know what flanking was. So, of course, the first gun was saying, well, if your flanker was waving his flag, them few grouse might have come my way. And I'm like, well, I couldn't really say to the gun, well, the first flanker don't know what flanking is. So he'd say, why have you got him? But after the end of the day, there was just something about A1 Jockey that just, through the day, I was like, Roy, do not bring this man again. I didn't say that to him, but that was my feelings, right? But when I was walking and talking to this guy, you could see that there was something, there's a background to this that he didn't deserve me telling him that. Anyhow, I said to the lads in the kitchen, mate, can you tomorrow bring us a packed lunch for these, but they're for A1 Jockey. I got him some boots and a pair of waterproof trousers. And anyhow, all of a sudden, A1 Jockey every day got stronger and stronger, picked the grouse up, made sure they were where they want to be, and picked the cartridges up and morning and, started to be part of the team. And I can remember at the time my boss saying, Steve, who's this guy? Who's he? I said, well, Roy, yeah. And I told him the story, A1 Jockey. He said, that's great. I was like, yeah, I know. It is a great story. I said, but to start with, what am I going to do with him? After about 3 weeks to a month, A1 Jockey was part of the team. Everybody thought the world of him. The girls brought him a bit of cake and gave him a flask. And he was all set up, to be the next best flanker. And he had a heart as big as a bucket. But he had some background issues with various different things, which we were helping him with. Anyway, A1 Jockey turned up 6 days a week, every day, mega. Anyhow, one Monday morning comes around and Roy turns up. I said, where's A1 Jockey? He had his routine. He's disappeared, Steve. So what do you mean he's disappeared? He said, he's gone. I said, gone? I said, we got plans for him. I thought, wow, tomorrow he'll be here. So next day comes around. I said, Roy, where's A1? Steve, I've got to show you this. Anyhow, A1 he'd got a cereal box and wrote on the back of the cereal box, he'd cut it up and wrote me a letter saying, thank you very much to you and everybody. He said, I've never been so happy and never felt so good. But he was scared it was going to end and disappeared.
Goodness me.
So if anybody knows where A1 Jockey is, when they listen to this podcast, we would like to find out what happened to A1. And since then, I've always looked at what a difference that made to him. He got back on his feet. We don't need to be scholars, but I'm thick, but I'm not stupid. And I think there's a place for these guys, all the beaters, they've all got different things going on. But, when you give them a bit of responsibility and show them the community that we're all in and why we do it, they really do it brings the best out of them. And, they all, morning Gaffer, what Gaffer, where are we going now? And they'd even look at the wind direction in the morning. I bet we're going to do this today and that, and we'll take it onto there, Steve. And these are lads that would, all their days would probably be, the head teacher's worst nightmare. But because they were fit, out there making it happen, and we treated them right. If they needed to kick up the arse, we kick them up the arse. But when they did well, we tell them. And A1 Jockey was probably one of my prouder moments when watching this. Honestly, if you can picture a homeless, I don't know how many years he'd been on the streets, but a bloody long time, and we got him smartened up, and every single member, we'd employ up to 80 people a day. and moor at times, and every single person looked out for A1 and each other. So I think the shooting world, it's not what you've got or what you want to have. It's it's more a case of getting on with it, which was good.
An absolutely amazing story. And I think, we often talk about how important shooting is for communities and the bonds that it forges. But I mean, that underlines that in a way that's more than just, people getting together for a drink in the pub afterwards. That is the real power of community. And, hats off to you guys because, like you said, you took a pretty big risk there. But
I think a lot of it was a little bit of luck and timing. Genuinely, when A1 Jockey came up that drive, I was shaking my head going, I don't need this in my life right now. So it was a massive learning curve for me. You know what I mean? I was sort of like, I'm going shooting, I've got this to do, I've got that to do, and everything's more important than or you think things are more important. But actually, A1 Jockey, whenever anybody turns up now, I'm like, this could be A1.
Yeah, it's so sad, but so amazing at the same time that the experience that he had, you had, but so sad that he felt the need to then disappear.
But there wasn't anybody, honestly, there wasn't anybody in the villages, because everybody knew him. You know what I mean? Everybody knew him. There wasn't anybody that didn't look out for him. And I think he genuinely did feel safe, but just he obviously has that, whatever it is in his life, and just moved on again.
But I mean, to go from, it sounds like he was in a pretty bad way when he arrived. And, I was going to say, a lot of people listening to this will have done a bit of beating, as part of their shooting apprenticeship, so to speak. And, maybe they've got a walk one, stand one, shoot or something like that in their syndicate. Beating on a grouse moor is not for the faint-hearted. It's not like, tapping through a bit of maize.
No. No.
What mileage is an average grouse beater doing on a day?
God, I mean, must be getting up towards 10 miles, 15 miles, won't they?
Through heather.
Yeah. What you've got to do, if you want to start grouse moor, this is the best bit of advice I can give you. If you two lads want to start grouse beating, my advice to you is to start on the 12th of August, right? Because everybody is in the same shape.
It's like pre-season, isn't it?
Yeah. Right? If you decide in September, I'll have a go at that.
Yeah.
Right? You ain't going to last 2 minutes, because when them drives come in, when them lads have been doing it day in, day out, and ladies, and by the way, girls are much better at driving grouse than lads, right? Because they're like Ron Seal, they do what it says on the tin. Lads every now and then think they can reinvent the next grouse drive, but honestly, when them drives come in, the speed they come in at, you drop into there, and you'll drop in on the first drive and go, you know what, Steve's right, I'm not doing this ever again, and if I am going to do it again, I'm going to start on the 12th of August.
You almost, it sounds like you almost have like training camps pre-season for warm up for the beaters.
But you just, they're the makers of it, aren't they? Without them, you can't do it. And they're just mega. I mean, look, I used to have my run-ins with them, but they were good as gold.
So this is a pretty major, 3 moors, right? Over a huge amount of ground.
Mm.
And you're head keeper of that. That's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
And the influence that those moors are having in that area is, significant, right?
Yeah, but delegation's everything, isn't it? You can't, let's not kid myself or kid anybody. I wasn't the only person there. I had some very strong lads that worked for me, and a team around you, which makes it easier, delegation, and that's what makes it work. And
did you find your role over that period of time? I'm sure it wasn't always the same, but in terms of the sort of public nature of the importance of like a head keeper or that moor, did you find your role change somewhat? Were you involved in stuff towards the end that you just wouldn't have thought of being involved in at the start?
No, I've never been involved in anything at all apart from my day-to-day job.
Right.
So I've never been involved. Nothing. All I did was that job. Nothing else. I was never involved. So part of where I am now is I want to give back some of the good times that I've had. I'll give it all back to help and perhaps find a way to, sustainability is the word. And I think the things that, I'm 51 and my grandfather's keeping for me. So I can go back as far as you need to go, really, in today's world. And I think some of the things that I've learned would like to think can help make the difference moving forward. Because if we've got to get it right, and I think we can do it.
But I mean, there can't be that many grouse keepers in the country. I mean, I don't know how many there would be, but you had, I think Chris said 15 guys under you.
Yeah.
And so a big part of that giving back is you will have been mentoring and coaching and helping these lads to improve and passing on a lot of your knowledge over that period, right? So, that even when you were doing it, you were giving back in that sense.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say I didn't stand there training lads. I think they just pick up on it,
Yeah.
Just
learn on the job.
I never had, when lads used to come to work on the estate, they knew that it's the right way or the highway. I know it sounds a bit bad that, but my attention to detail's got to be there. And if you get the detail right, the rest of it's easy.
So you finished at Allen Heads in 2020. What are you up to now?
I'm just drifting along a bit, really.
So what would you like to, I mean, knowledge like you've got has got to be passed on to as many different places as possible, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in today's world, everybody's got a pretty switched on to how to produce grouse. So it's how to sustain where we are moving forward is going to be the bit we need to work on. So yeah, I'm involved in some management on different places.
Got time for more though?
Do I just want to help. So as you know, Tarquin's a very good friend of mine. Oh, did I say that live?
Yeah, we can cut it though. We can cut it, or I'll bleep it.
That's the second time this has happened to me. I actually said it once. I like Tarquin, and then I've just said it again. Anyhow, I'll have to get over it.
He's a previous podcast guest. If this is the first one you're listening to, wind back and you can hear him.
I know, yeah. Well, I've heard him lots over the last few decades. But anyhow, so he invited me to get involved in some of the moorland matters things. And because I've not been involved in it all, I've been sort of stuck in my little world as a grouse moor keeper. And then since stepping away from that, I have been involved in discussions with lots of different people. And the picture that I pick up on is nobody's anti-shooting, they're anti-industry. So, and I think that moving forward, I'd like to learn a bit more about the anti-industry so we can look at that more. And the Moorland Matters thing has, I met Chris there. I met lots. I don't know how many guests he's had at these things, but lots. And I get to talk to these people that I thought I'd never ever talked to. And there's people there that are pretty smart guys and girls that have never been on a grouse moor. And I'm like, wow, I cannot believe these people haven't been involved in a day-to-day of an upland, because they do play a massive part in it. So I've had a big wakey, really. And I do feel that I've got to help, and whatever I can to do to help, then I will.
Chris, I think maybe you should just, for people who haven't heard us talk about Moorland Matters before, just give a quick overview about what those events are. I mean, I wasn't able to go this year, but I think I'll.
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm arranging it at the moment. You'll be on one next year. They are absolutely mega. So basically, Tarquin, along with some other people, pulled together these events and got to some moorland in springtime. And you've got obviously hatching going on everywhere. And you'll get out early in the morning to see what goes on, to see the huge number of ground nesting birds on that moor, and just the wildlife absolutely teeming in a way that you just don't see it if you're up there during shooting time. And I hadn't had the fortunate luck to be on a moor during that time, and it blew me away. And obviously, you see people like Steve wandering around, spotting grouse chicks, just understanding exactly what's going on, seeing what the other birds are doing and where issues might be, and so on. And it's fascinating. And then what happens after that is the group, which is quite a diverse group, gets together to have really interesting discussion, to share their thoughts on some of the issues facing the uplands or countryside management in general.
I was going to say, I think one of the things that's interested me most about the project is that it's not just taking the usual suspects, right? It's not just, the editor of the field and the guy who runs guns on pegs and what have you. There's people who are potentially not on side with the whole concept of shooting, and there's an opportunity to do a bit of outreach and education and to form opinion or shape it.
Exactly. And it's kind of like some of the content we're seeing on Scribehound with the differing approaches to certain issues that are going on. It's fascinating. And I think the prerequisite to turn up to one of these events is you've got to be passionate about something. And you come at it from your angle, ideally with some knowledge. And you'll get different walks of life there going, do you know what? As lovely as that sounds, and you can think you've got the best idea ever, as lovely as that sounds, it just doesn't work in my world. And what we find is this, and we come up against these issues. And then you'll get someone else going, that's really interesting. We have that one, but we also see that from what he's saying. And we went away with a bunch of really good ideas. And I actually felt a lot closer to those that probably at initial glance would oppose everything that I love, because I felt there was a lot more common ground than what gets portrayed in the media.
Yes, well, I mean, I'm a cynical journalist, and I know that the media and none of them have an interest in people finding common ground. That's not good telly. It's not. Exactly. It doesn't sell newspapers. Everyone gets along just fine isn't a headline that sells newspapers. So what they're looking for is you think grouse shooting's great, you think grouse shooting's terrible, and fight. That's what makes a great 5-minute segment on Good Morning Britain or whatever, is two people yelling at each other rather than having sensible, informed and civilized debate with each other.
The people that I met, they were very, very, it was great. It genuinely opened my eyes knowing that there is a way forward, and these people, both ways. I'm not saying but they didn't understand where we were coming from, and quite frankly, we didn't understand where they were coming from. So, having these meetings and listening, and I'll be a hypocrite. When I was grouse keeping, that's what I do, and that's what that's where I'm going. So I think that listening and working it out is going to be good for the future. And the Moorland Matters things definitely brings them together.
Did you take a lot of pride from the knock-on effects of good grouse keeping on biodiversity?
I think so. Years ago, there was, and it was the late Mr. Stone always used to say, good grouse keeping, you got conservation for free. And I think that in today's world, we're all looking at this differently, and I think it's good conservation work. We get grouse shooting free.
This is another topic that we've discussed on the podcast before. I think it was with Dylan Williams.
Yeah.
And he's big on the idea of effectively rebranding gamekeepers as conservation managers or wildlife marshals. Rangers. I can't remember what rangers, something along those lines, and not calling it gamekeeper because it undersells what work that you guys do.
So the point that I'm bringing is that if you say good grouse moor management, you get conservation free. That narrows it down to all the people in the room at a Moorland Matters meeting narrows it down to 2 people probably. If you turn it round and good conservation work and you get grouse shooting free, everybody sat around that table has an influence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from a public perspective, you're getting the conservation work for free as well because it's privately funded.
But look, I'm not saying I know, but what I do think is that I enjoyed talking to these people and I enjoyed listening to them. And the people that I thought would have been anti-shooting at these meetings were definitely not anti-shooting. You know, they were judging a book by its cover. And I think it's up to us to open the book and show them beyond the cover. As, you know, there's lots of things that, you know, I've never been involved in anything. This is my first ever public thing I've ever done here now with you guys. So I'm not involved in nothing at all. So
it's a really interesting thing about the countryside in general, you know, farming, everything. We have been encouraged for such a long time to think of it all as being under attack. And I think traditionally as well, the countryside is quite, and people who live there and work there have been quite insular, than not that interested in having people, incomers coming in and getting involved or being there at all, really. And, you know, there's that cliche of farmers shouting, "Get off my land" at people. And I'm sure there have been times when you've had to turn people around and say the footpath's actually over there, that kind of thing. But I do wonder whether, in order to get that social license, we need to be a bit more open as a community and say, actually, no, do come and see, because we're proud of what we do. And it might be that you don't like it, but I suspect that's because you don't understand it. But we can't expect anybody to understand it if we're putting up barriers.
Yeah, it's how it's presented and delivered. You know, it's a bit like the safety talk. It needs to be short, sharp, and effective, not, you know, me talking about grouse for the next 3 hours because you lads would fall asleep and rather listen to Tarquin. You know?
We could debate that one another time.
Yeah. No, I don't know the answers, but what I do know is there's a lot of good people in the background of our industry that are moving forward. You know, it does feel very positive about, you know, people coming together, people looking at it in a different light. I do, you know, and the industry itself, you know, and the people talk about how bad it is. Well, it's never been as good. You know, every grouse moor's producing grouse. You know, the uplands have gone from unfavourable to favourable. You know, from all the hard work from every governing body to the landowners to the keepers. You know, all the restoration work that's taken place. You know, we're doing bloody well. And you know, farming. You know, I still see farmers smiling and enjoying their job. So I'm a little bit the opposite. I think we're in a good place, but what we've got to do is sustain it. And the only way to sustain that is probably by opening the book instead of just letting them see the cover.
Yeah. Do you miss it? Do you miss running the days? No. So you're not tempted to go back into gamekeeping? You don't you don't fancy wild greys or something like that?
I think that's a no, George.
That's fairly emphatic.
I'm involved in a big project at the minute, and that, you know, once my brain's set on that, which it is, there's so many people want to have the opportunities that I've had. So I need to be a little bit less selfish and go, I want to do that now. You know, what I want to do is help the people achieve, you know, the goals in which they want to achieve. So I'm a little bit more,
That's very good of you.
Well, I would say, but you know, it's true, isn't it? There isn't anything I haven't achieved within the industry. I've got this badge, and I'd be great. You know, some of the lads that have worked for me, they've gone on to being head keepers on different estates. You know, I just rather right now, my pleasure would be to be involved in helping them and making sure that they go another, you know, into the next 2 or 3 decades of what we did.
I think that's a mega lesson for any keeper in terms of how they think about all of this, to sort of think like that. I think that would be incredibly powerful.
I didn't want to, I'll be honest, when I left. I didn't want to do it ever again. I didn't want to go near it. I'd had enough. But I was invited to go and look after a chap, and he was in a similar sort of situation, an elderly chap. And we got up on the fell on early August, and I was doing it as a favour for somebody. Anyhow, we got in this grouse, but we didn't know each other. We knew of each other, and he was there's me sort of, I've had enough of this, and I don't want to do it. And then he started playing that game, and I was like the devil's advocate. I said, "Here, I'm not having that. We've got this. No, that's not right." So, but all the things he was moaning about, that's what I've been moaning about. But so we played this ping pong, and then afterwards, I remember after a couple of days, he gets in the car and he said to his wife, he said, "You know what? We've got this. Steve's told me so many things, and what things he thinks about, and how we think about it, and how we could present this, and what we could do next. And we've got this, And this was a chap who owned a grouse moor, So between us since then, last year and this year, we often catch up with each other and share our thoughts on what we've seen and what we could do next. And I do. I think there's a lot of positivity out there. And all the groups are coming together, and everybody's spending the time with each other, And the years gone by, we didn't, did we? We just, what's mine's mine. And
I love it. That's a lovely way to try and wrap this up, because that's positive, and I'm really glad
100%.
to hear it.
It's actually incredibly inspiring to hear you speak, Steve. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I agree. So, Steve, the way we finish these pods up is with desert island shooting. The extinction level asteroid hits tomorrow. Your affairs are in order, loved ones and enemies reconciled, dogs fed, tomatoes watered. Your last day begins how?
Well, it wouldn't be shooting, unfortunately, but I would probably like May the 27th we'll go for.
Very specific. I like it.
Where 27th? No, a bit earlier, sorry. Where the hens are just about hatching, so they'll come off the nest quicker. So my passion or my drug is to watch hens go back to a nest and watch and see how the nests are doing and monitor the nests. And a hen, as she gets closer to hatching, which is towards the end of May, the main hatches, that is, she'll come off and feed quicker. You haven't got to wait so long before she goes back to the nest. So if you wait, if you're looking for nests in the beginning of May, that she's probably 10 days off or 14 days off hatching. You'll know that she'll feed a bit longer because she knows they're not going to hatch. When you get to prime time, she'll nip off the nest, bolt over to her favourite watering hole, then bolt over and get as much down her neck as possible, and then straight back to the nest. So if you time this, and I know I keep mentioning this awful man Tarquin, but I used to say to him, Tarquin, now's the time. And it was, it's a bit like a Flash Gordon moment where he jumps in the car and flies as fast as he can to Northumberland to spend this golden moment of probably 48 hours of maximum of where the hens just come off, go back, go away. And you can just find so many nests, record so much in that time. It's priceless. And I've said to him many a time, Tarquin, now. So that's what I would do. Not go shooting, but if that was my last moments, that's what I would do. That's
amazing.
I must say, to do it with someone like the knowledge of you, I'd sit there in the passenger seat of the car out the window with the binos.
With a beer. We always take a beer with us.
Yeah. Nice cold beer on a May evening.
But the thing is,
early morning.
No, it can be any time. They just come off. It's a bit like fish. They just start feeding. Not that I know much about fishing, but it's just that moment. And but I'll take you one day. I'll take you both.
I'm going to take you up on that.
I'll take you.
Wait,
and I'll get some
27th of May. You say I'm going to put it in the diary.
Well, I'll take you, and then you will be addicted because you'll be like, I'm going to find this one before Steve. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The game. And then it'll be, George, I'm not going to tell you there's one here until I found it. So it's very much that.
And so the nice thing about it being May is you've got a nice long day.
I know.
It might be nice and warm.
Yeah.
And then you can maybe slip into a nice local pub for something refreshing once you come down.
We'll have a deal.
Hill.
For every nest you find, I buy you a pint. For every nest I find, you buy me 2.
That sounds like an awful deal.
I reckon it sounds like it's worth it, Chris.
I will take him up on it, I suppose. Yeah. Well, actually, George, it's you and me. So if we've both got a pair of binos looking in 2 directions,
I'm still going to beat you.
Oh, awesome, Steve.
That's amazing.
What a privilege to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Well, and I should also say, I've been booking the guests for the last little while, but Chris set this one up. So thank you, Chris. I've absolutely loved this. It's been amazing.
Yeah, really good.
Great. Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Right. So, as per usual, there is one final reminder that you can get your hands on a pair of the very exclusive Guns on Pegs podcast shooting sock garters by sending us your shooting dilemmas for us to resolve, or by sending us your unpopular opinions, or sharing in a forgotten drive, or by sending something that we think's funny enough to be read out. Just send us an email to pod@gunsonpegs.com, and if we read it out in the next episode or any future episodes, we will send you some garters. We will be back in a couple of weeks' time with another episode. But until then, thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.
Wow.